Number one is that healthy doesn't equal certain. I had to really grasp at one point or another in dating and even relationships that I have with family that just because things aren't necessarily as predictable and have such an easy result doesn't mean that it's not healthy. I had to actually learn that healthiness actually includes a level of uncertainty because in order for it to be healthy, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be perfect, everything has to be aligned, everything has to go according to plan. It actually means that I'm able to trust myself, to trust my ability to recover, but more importantly, to be okay in the event of going through seasons and relationships where an answer just isn't given. Now, of course, this isn't applied to things like cheating or infidelity or that person that you're with being uncertain about you, but more so about uncertain situations. Okay, from jobs loss to finances to just uncertainty about certain struggles, certain challenges that either of us are experiencing. The healthiness isn't determined by having the predicted outcome. I've learned that it actually has a lot more to do with my ability to regulate and, of course, play a role in helping regulate the person that I'm with, as well as them regulating themselves. Also, just having a little bit of that co regulation and individual regulation that makes a difference in being able to ride the waves that uncertainty can offer because life be lifing. And we can't control the things that we can't control when it comes to life, external situations, unforeseen circumstances, but I can control how I respond to it. And so instead of needing certainty, there's a need for safety. Because safety doesn't necessarily guarantee a predicted outcome. It just means that in the midst of uncertainty, there's stability. Okay, there's reassurance, there's groundingness in what we have, where we are, who we are, right? And so instead of conflating safety to mean certainty, it means no, in the midst of even questions and unfinished answers, there's still a sense of safety because there is still an invitation to connection and that you're essentially not going through what you're going through alone. And that just makes a huge difference in and of itself. Number two, conflict does not equal incompatibility. When I used to have conflict with relationships in my own life, it used to always be easy to be like, oh, then that just means that we're not really meant to be connected. If we got into a disagreement or argument, we don't see things eye to eye. Maybe there were times where I can remember they didn't see things the way I saw it, right? Like there was an expectation for them to see things exactly in the same way. And when they didn't, it had me thinking like, man, is this God like telling me that this just doesn't work? This shouldn't work. This isn't something that's supposed to be available. And what I had to learn was that conflict is actually a part of relationships. Conflict is actually, not just something that we should expect, but something that we should learn to incorporate and navigate through in order to return safely, repair safely, and more importantly, noticing that because conflict happens, that's actually us being human. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're missing something or that we're failing or that we don't go together. All right. Because truth is that going together is an absent of conflict. Going together actually shows signs that we have the ability to ride the waves that conflict can present, trusting each other to come back together, to reconnect, and looking for the best opportunity to repair the quickest. Even if it starts really slow, it doesn't mean it can't develop. And because conflict is a part of relationships, it's about learning how to recover in the event that conflict happens and doing it lovingly, safely, and understanding one another and making that the priority more than being understood. And I think from my own experiences, that actually has helped me monitor the fights I pick, the arguments I might kind of engage in, but more importantly, just again, coming back to that sense of safety and stability within myself to be able to trust how I'm recovering in the process. Which leads to number three, that being chosen doesn't equal choosing well. It's one thing to be chosen. There's a lot of people that I've recognized over the course of my life would prefer me, choose me, and all these things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm choosing well by choosing them too. And I think this kind of goes back into a couple maybe stigmas that you've heard. You are what you attract, or they're the if you're attracting the wrong person, the problem is you. And even though there can be some truth to that statement, depending on exactly the context of it, what I've learned is that, you can actually be healed and be healthy and still attract something that doesn't necessarily align with you. And that doesn't mean something is wrong with you because I think anybody who wants healthiness, sees healthiness, and may make an attempt to connect with healthiness. But it's not so much about being chosen as it is my growing ability to choose well. And being able to choose well isn't just because I'm choosing who chooses me, but choosing well and trusting my values, what I align in, and not feeling like I have to abandon those things in order to make room for someone else who clearly likes me, clearly wants me, or clearly wants to connect with me, but I'm not just going to respond to that because of attention. You know, you can get attention anywhere. What I've learned is that the value of one's attention is oftentimes based on where someone finds themselves at mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Do we connect? Do we align? And more importantly, do we have compatibility to be able to build a life together? Is this something that I genuinely want? Right? Instead of just wanting who wants me, which sounds really good in theory, but in a lot of ways, just because somebody wants me doesn't necessarily mean that I have to want them. And there still needs to be a vetting process that occurs so that we can measure some things up and make a healthy decision. And I can remember times where I picked people out of pressure. I, chose to connect with someone because they were giving me all this attention and it was awesome, it was amazing, their good morning good night text, and I'm getting all these things, but that didn't really mean that I was choosing well, because truthfully it was just stroking my ego, or even just feeding into some of the anxiousness that I was unwilling to address with at that time in my life, that played a huge role in me clinging to outcomes, chasing, performing. And it put me behind the eight ball, not because this person's interest, but because of my inability to still take their interest as information, to still process, and just reacting and going with the wind. And when I learned that, I think it made a huge difference in how I choose, because even though someone may want me, I recognize in confidence and fullness and abundance that they see something in me that I see in me. And that means that we have some agreement in there, and that's amazing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I still don't need to vet you out to make sure that this is still a healthy decision, or the right decision that makes sense for the season of life I'm in, or where I'm going, the vision I have, and making healthy choices in the relationship from there. Which leads me to number four. Understanding your patterns does not equate to changing them. I can't stress this enough. And this was something that I experienced, especially going through my earlier stages in my development of growth and faith in my mental and emotional well being. It's just the fact that you can know so many things. You can know the language, you can know the scriptures, you can go to church, you can take all the notes, you can have all the right verbiage, all the things, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're changing, because change requires application. Change requires behavior. Change requires intentionality. And one of the things that I used to love hiding behind so much in my earlier stages, just because I had such a gift of communicating, was just being able to talk. I was able to sound really eloquent, really well put together, and all these things made sense. But the shift that happened in my life that allowed me to see changes in my attachment style, that allowed me to see changes in how I engage in relationships, was not just understanding, or not just knowledge, having the right verbiage. It was actually facing me. It was sitting down. It was journaling. It was actually reflecting on behaviors that I experienced in the day, visualizing how I could be better. It was actually me being honest that a lot of what was pushing some of the clinginess, the chasing, the performance, the hypersensitivity that I once carried in my anxious attachment was the belief that I thought this was as good as it was going to get, and that I wasn't really available for more. And I had to hold on to this for dear life. Facing honest truths about myself, behaviors about myself, and then actively one day in front of another, using that as feedback to engage with on a daily process, is what changed the game. No longer just getting caught up on more knowledge, but actually applying it to the best of my abilities of what I knew how. Thankful for coaching, thankful for community, thankful for support that was really helpful in helping me digest these things over time. But I had to really see that putting this thing into practice made the difference. Okay. There was one thing I knew about gratitude, but it was another thing to apply it. Right. It was one thing to tell myself that this now isn't going to be my forever. Right. This season isn't going to last. It was another thing to actually put into practice the gratitude list that I had to engage in every day, to focus in on abundance instead of zooming in on lack. It was the difference between me downward spiraling on not getting a text back and being able to enjoy the rest of my day and continue living my life in fullness, because my value wasn't tied to the text message not being responded to. It was a difference between identifying my anxious attachment and actually healing, becoming secure. It was me putting these practices into play every day. It was me putting my phone down, getting into gratitude, meditating and visualizing. That just continued to make a massive difference for my healing and growth moving forward, which finally leads me to number 5. Love does not always equate to preserving the relationship. One thing about me and part of my story, as I've shared plenty of times, is I've experienced rejections, every now and again, and maybe even regularly at one point in my life. But one rejection that stood out to me the most in my life, especially when it came to romantic relationships, was a relationship that happened around 2023. And to spare all the details, one of the things that I had to learn in this relationship was that even though I really wanted it, and I really wanted this person, and I really wanted to see what we could be, real love actually gave me the ability to move with an open hand and let her go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, things were bad or things were worse. No, actually, I was the one that was rejected at the end of the day. But I had to learn the importance of not white knuckling, clinging, or trying to force my way or hurry my way to a destination that I really wanted just because I really liked the person, or I really thought that there was something good that could come out of our connection if we just tried and if we both put in the effort. I had to learn that sometimes love equates to letting go. Love gives you the ability to actually allow somebody to walk if they desire. Love gives the ability for someone to make a decision that isn't forced to stay or connect with you. Real love at its core is not selfish. Real love at its core is not you being at the center of the universe and becoming a black hole. In reality, it's patient, it's kind. It doesn't envy, it doesn't boast. It is not proud, it doesn't dishonor others. It is not self seeking, and it's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs, and it doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres, and it never fails. And one of the things that I've had to put into practice is recognizing that my open hand does so much more for me than a closed fist ever would. And when I move with an open hand, even if somebody walks away, yes, it gives them the opportunity to change their mind. Yes, it gives them the opportunity to go in a different direction. And what I wanted to happen maybe is no longer available. But this is something that gives me the opportunity to not just learn the importance of regulating, but learn at the end of the day that the love that I possess, the love that I'm full with, the love that I'm called to live in by God has never been determined by this person staying, this relationship succeeding, this relationship going to marriage, and has always been determined by the love that has already been given to me through what Christ did on the cross, and living in this abundance that allows me to shine forth this love regardless of what other people do for me or don't do for me, and not needing other people to be a certain way for me to be okay. And this kind of love is the same love that on one hand in this rejection did hurt in the beginning, and on another gave me permission in the midst of her telling she didn't want it for me to say thank you. I'm proud of you. And walking away with my head held high, not because of the belief, oh, she's missing out on something. Oh, this is no, no, no. It was really just a matter of a sense of fullness and maturity that I didn't regret any kind of love I gave, the fullness I moved in. And there was no part of me that felt taken advantage of, because in reality, the love was never dependent on the outcome. The love was dependent on who I was called to be, and me living that out, reflecting and preserving not the relationship, but the heart of Christ, which also gives us the ability to allow someone to say no, to allow something to fall apart, and to allow relationships to no longer be, because that can also be just as loving as maybe the outcome we wanted and that we may have wished for. Both are loving, and we can appreciate that. And those are 5 things that I've learned and that I've had to change my mind on when it comes to love in a healthy way. And I want to know which one stuck out to you most. Which one did you find most helpful? And if you found something and listened to this and you were like, you know what, bro, I feel I'm in the same position as you, and I really need to actually put some practice and put some things into practice to actually intentionally grow to building this relational discernment, choosing healthily, and finding the right love, becoming a healthy person for the right love. I want you to check out the link in the description. There you'll be able to find a relational diagnostic on becoming-secure.com, which is my link to my webpage. Be sure to click that, enter relationship portal, so you can actually get a diagnostic that's for free, that actually allows you to see where you are in your discerning levels and what you need to do to grow from there. Okay. And I hope to see you on the other side. Subscribe, like this video, comment which one stood out to you most. I'd love to hear from you. I'm excited to see you in the comment section and for our next video. And until then, be easy and be breezy. Peace.